Welcome back. You're watching Credlin. Now, during the chaotic leaders' debate on Sunday night, one of the loudest exchanges was over the Port of Darwin. The port, you might remember, was leased to a Chinese company in 2015 during the Turnbull government era on a 99-year lease. Now, it was a policy disaster then, and it's a policy failure now, given neither the Prime Minister or the opposition leader have committed to bringing the port back under Australian control. This despite both leaders talking tough on China and putting national security at the forefront of their election campaigns. The Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Peter Jennings, has written on this very issue in the Australian newspaper Today, and he joins me now from Canberra. Peter, if neither major party is going to back up their national security rhetoric with real action on this issue, then that's a real concern about the sovereign control of this very strategic Australian port.
It's very disappointing, Peter. Both sides of politics have had 7 years to determine that they could actually bring the port back under Australian control. Labor could have announced that as a way of burnishing its national security credentials coming into this election. Both sides have chosen not to do that. The reason why this matters, apart from the fact that Darwin is such a strategically located port, is because we're very likely to see larger numbers of US military forces coming to Australia in coming years. That's part of the American plan. It was always in anticipation to grow the US Marine presence in Darwin. They need someplace to go. They need a port to be able to make use of. And the fact that we have a Chinese company operating the Port of Darwin is something which is going to severely complicate our capacity to build up the north, which I think is going to be, a militarily very necessary thing to do as we move into an increasingly risky strategic future.
I know from pollsters on both sides, this issue is coming up unprompted in focus groups. So it's cut through like few issues do. What would be involved in changing their mind here? I mean, there's 12 days to go. Either of them could come out and say, sorry, we're going to tear it up, we'll pay the compensation or whatever is required to get out of this deal, but we're not going to have the Chinese run, or a Chinese company, Chinese, let's be honest, run our port in Darwin. How do they fix it?
Well, if they have to, they could do it in a bipartisan way. I mean, frankly, Peter, I don't think this is going to be fixed before the election now. The government had its opportunity a few months back after Peter Dutton asked Defence to review the port, but Defence couldn't sort of back away from the decision it found itself in 2015 when it said it had no problem with the lease. The problem with that is that we're in a very different strategic world now, Peter, and I think it's not good enough for the Prime Minister to say, well, I'm just waiting for military advice. He's happy enough to overturn military advice like the French submarines when he chooses to do so. This is going to take national leadership from whoever the next Prime Minister is going to be. And yes, the Chinese won't like it, but clearly they don't like anything we're doing at the moment. And I think if it enables us to speed up our military planning with the US for the north of Australia, then that's the advantage that we'll get by actually taking a decisive step instead of doing what I suspect will happen, which is just wait for a crisis and then it will be at the last minute and in response to something that China has done that the government will have to resume ownership.
It's not like the defence advice in 2015 and 2022 couldn't reasonably be different. I'm assuming defence advice in 1937 as opposed to 1942 was vastly different. Let's talk about the Solomon Islands. There was a draft maritime cooperation agreement we know that was leaked. There's a deal now in relation, they call it fishing, that will enable the Chinese to build wharves and shipyards, submarine cables, a whole lot of other things in the Solomon Islands for use by the Chinese military. This comes on the back of comments from the Prime Minister in the Solomon Islands saying that there was these threats to invasion for the Solomons. I don't think this has anything to do with fishing. I suspect you don't either. This is likely cover for Chinese infrastructure builds and potential troop deployments into the Solomons, isn't it?
That's exactly right, Peter. And I've been saying from the get-go that I thought China was going to move really quickly to consolidate the advantage it's got by having signed this agreement with Prime Minister Sogavare. We've seen how quickly China was able to move into the South China Sea, build those harbours and airfield facilities, basically in the stretch of about 2 years. So China is not going to wait around. But of course, it's all going to be done under the cover of saying that it's for economic infrastructure. When China built those island facilities in the South China Sea, initially it was for tourism, then it was going to be protecting the environment in the South China Sea. Only at the last moment did it become very clear that it was part of a military plan. So we should expect China to move fast, much faster than we're capable of doing. And, don't be surprised to see construction on ports beginning, very, very quickly.
Peter Jennings, thank you for your time.